I never liked microphones. I hated the way they made your own voice sound bigger than you ever felt. But there I was, 32 years old, standing under strings of fairy lights in a barn that smelled like old wood and rose petals, holding a microphone so tight my knuckles ached. 100 eyes on me. Friends, cousins, her side of the family, all of them leaning in, wine glasses tilted, waiting for the kind of speech that makes people clap and maybe cry for all the right reasons. At my left shoulder, Emma, my wife, 28, hair pinned up in the style she always said made her feel like someone new. Her hand rested on my arm like she was steadying me, or maybe steadying herself. Hard to tell anymore. I could see the DJ by the wall, half hidden behind stacks of rented speakers. The best man, David, 33, my oldest friend, stood just off to the side. His smile was too wide, like he knew where this was going before I did. I'd written my vows 100 times in my head, practiced them out loud on nights when I was sure she was asleep. But what I said tonight wasn't what I practiced. Because 2 hours before I stepped up here, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Her phone. A message that didn't bother hiding its teeth. The kind you can't explain away with "it's nothing, babe." The kind that said meet me later when she was supposed to be meeting forever with me. The barn smelled like flowers and champagne, and someone else's cologne I hadn't worn. The guests were waiting for me to say something tender, grateful, to raise a glass and thank them for loving us. Instead, I cleared my throat, felt my heart thrum against the mic stand. Emma's hand squeezed tighter. Maybe she thought she could hold the truth down. Maybe she still believed I wouldn't dare say it out loud. But I'd always been too quiet. Tonight, I was done being quiet. I looked at her, then at David, then back at the room, full of people who still thought this was a love story. Before we start this next chapter, I said, voice steady like a blade held flat, I think there's something you all should know. And for the first time in years, I felt something close to honest. Nobody moved at first, not even Emma. Her fingers went slack on my arm, then clamped tighter like maybe if she squeezed hard enough, she could force the words back into my throat. I looked at her, really looked, the way you study a painting up close when you're trying to find the brush strokes, the cracks under the varnish. She didn't look like the woman I proposed on a rainy sidewalk 2 years ago, ring clutched in my shaking fist. She looked like a stranger who'd borrowed Emma's face. David shifted his weight near the cake table. Our three-tiered lie topped with plastic figures frozen in a pose that made my stomach turn. He raised his glass half an inch, like he could toast away what he knew was coming. I turned the microphone slightly, made sure the cheap speakers caught every syllable. I wanted no echo lost. I wanted the truth to bounce off these beams and lodge in their memories forever. You know, I said, letting my eyes sweep the room, her parents, my mother wiping the corner of her eye, thinking maybe I was about to cry too. When you stand up here, you're supposed to thank people for coming, for traveling, for loving you enough to spend a night pretending fairy lights and a rented barn can hold two lives together. A thin laugh somewhere in the back. Someone thinking I was nervous, that this was my shaky attempt at humor. They didn't know how close they were to the truth. Emma's mouth twitched. She tried to smile, her lips sticking to her teeth. I wondered if she'd say don't, or please, or if she'd lie the way she had in her messages. Easy, practiced, pretty. I let the silence grow teeth. David coughed into his sleeve, eyes darting to the exit. He wouldn't run. He'd stand here and swallow it just like she would. I shifted my weight, felt my heartbeat hammer through the mic, so I just want to say thank you. I went on, my voice calm in a way that made the closest people lean in, hunting for the catch. Thank you for showing me exactly what love is, and what it isn't. I felt her nails dig into my wrist thin, sharp enough to draw a sting. She knew it was too late. She could feel it leaving my chest, word by word. Somewhere outside, fireworks popped in the night, the parting gift we planned to end the night with. They started early. Perfect. Let them light up this lie while I burn it down. Emma's hand fell away from my wrist. Just like that. The grip gone, the pretend support slipping through the space between us like a breath that wouldn't come back. A few people laughed, polite and uncertain, glancing at each other like maybe they'd missed the joke. But I didn't give them a punchline. I gave them the truth instead. One line at a time, steady, like I'd practiced in the mirror when I still thought I'd never say it out loud. You know, I always thought betrayal would look bigger. I said, the mic catching the quiver I didn't bother hiding. Some dramatic scene, screaming maybe, a door slamming at 2 in the morning. But it's smaller than that, isn't it? I looked at Emma then. Really looked. The blush creeping up her throat, the glassy panic at the corner of her eyes. Part of me wanted to stop, to spare her, to spare myself. But that part had already died when I read those words on her phone. See you after the party. David's smile was gone now. He stood stiff, arms folded, jaw twitching like he wanted to break in, say something, but he knew better. He knew every head was swiveling between him and Emma, the invisible line snapping tight, tracing a secret that was about to belong to everyone. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. A bridesmaid, Emma's sister, dropped her glass, the fizz of spilled champagne swallowing the barn's hush for half a second. I could feel my voice getting calmer. I hated that about myself. How pain made me cold. How when I wanted to scream, I sounded polite instead. I thought I'd share a toast tonight, I said, lifting my glass that hadn't been touched. The bubbles inside were dead now, flat and bitter on my tongue before I even sipped. So here's to my beautiful wife, for teaching me that forever is only as strong as the lock screen on her phone. And here's to my best friend, for proving that betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It sleeps next to you. It stands beside you when you say I do. The guests were frozen, forks halfway to mouths, napkins clenched in fists. Somewhere in the back, a kid started crying because even children know when a fairy tale is breaking. Emma opened her mouth. I waited for her to deny it, for the perfect lie she'd built her whole smile around. But all that came out was my name, half broken, not nearly enough to stitch this wound shut. She said my name once, a soft, helpless mark that trembled on her lips like maybe she still thought saying it sweet enough could change where we were standing. But her voice didn't reach me. Not really. It just drifted through the barn rafters and died somewhere near the fairy lights we'd spent a whole afternoon hanging, strand by strand, as if pretty lights could hold up vows we both knew she'd already broken. I didn't hand her the microphone. I didn't want her excuses echoing back at me through cheap speakers that couldn't polish a lie into anything I'd swallow twice. I just held my glass higher. Don't, I said, so quietly only she could hear it. Not here. Not now. Let's give them the truth before you dress it up. David shifted behind her. He cleared his throat, took a single step closer like maybe he'd stand in front of her, like maybe he thought he could block the spotlight I just turned on him too. The best man. The oldest friend. The secret that slept between us long before tonight. I locked eyes with him. No words, just a look that said I know. And worse, they know now too. He dropped his gaze to the floor. For a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. A murmur rolled through the room. Family leaning in, strangers whispering, the DJ frozen mid-song cue. Outside, the fireworks were still going off, tiny booms that felt cheap now. Forced applause for a scene nobody planned for. I scanned the faces that once looked like my future. My mother, shaking her head in that way that begged, please, stop this before you ruin us all. Her father, red-faced, one hand on the table like he might stand up and drag Emma off stage like a bad actor in the wrong scene. But I didn't step back. I didn't soften my voice. I just let it settle in the barn's quiet, so every syllable stuck. I always wanted to be the man who'd fight for her, I said, letting my eyes find hers one last time. Turns out I'm just the man who fought too late. I drained my glass. Warm bubbles, bitter throat. She reached for my wrist like she'd pull me back into the lie one last time. I let her touch me, but I didn't hold on. And when she tried to speak again, I turned away from her, faced the guests, and said, enjoy the cake. It's the only sweet thing left tonight. The clink of my glass on the head table was the loudest sound in the barn. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The fairy lights flickered above us like they were ashamed to keep shining on what we'd made of this night. Emma's hand still hovered inches from my wrist, fingers frozen mid-reach. Like maybe if she could just touch me, she could pull me back through time, to the moment before I knew, before I opened her phone and watched our vows collapse under a message she'd typed in the dark. David took another half step forward. He opened his mouth, maybe to apologize, maybe to lie, but I cut him off with a look so sharp it pinned him to the spot. I wanted him to feel this moment for the rest of his life. Every cheap word they'd whispered in shadows now burned raw in the open, where even the barn beams felt too honest to hold their secret any longer. Someone in the back cleared their throat. A chair scraped. Glasses clinked. The room had that hush you hear at funerals. Polite disbelief twisted around the ugly truth nobody wants to say out loud. Emma's mother stood, pale as frost, napkin balled in her fist. She looked like she might faint or scream, but she didn't either. Her father muttered something under his breath, too soft to catch, and sank back down, shoulders folding in like the weight of this lie was pressing him through the floorboards. And me? I felt nothing. Not the way I expected. No rage. No heartbreak that cracked me open in front of them. Just a cold, steady calm. Like I'd taken a knife out of my ribs and set it gently on the table for everyone to see. Emma's voice broke the quiet. Just my name again. A question caught in her throat. Mark. But my name didn't belong to her anymore. I guess that's all I have to say, I told the room. I gave them a tight smile that felt wrong on my face. Eat. Drink. Celebrate love. Or whatever this was pretending to be. I stepped off the little raised platform we called our altar. The microphone swung on its cord, squealing feedback that made a few people flinch. Behind me, I could hear Emma's breath catch, a soft, stifled sob that tried to pull me back. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn. I pushed through the stunned circle of family and strangers and stepped out into the night air where the fireworks were still bursting overhead. Tiny, pretty lies burning themselves out against a black sky that didn't care either way. Outside, the cold hit me first, a slap of wind cutting through my shirt sleeves, the echo of the barn door swinging shut behind me like a sigh. I could still hear the music inside, the muffled thud of a bass line that had no idea the party was already dead. I stepped off the gravel path and onto the grass, wetting shoes sinking in soft mud. The fireworks overhead fizzled out one by one, trailing thin threads of smoke across the sky, too clear to hide anything. I wondered if they were talking about me yet. Emma's family, my mother, David, the guests who'd driven in from 3 states away for an open bar and a love story. Were they angry? Embarrassed? Disappointed that the groom couldn't keep his shame private, tucked away behind polite smiles and fake kisses for the camera? I wanted to care. I really did. But all I felt was the raw, clean edge of relief humming through my chest like a second heartbeat. I walked toward the back lot where the cars were parked in crooked lines. Some of the fairy lights reached this far, little warm bulbs strung along fences to make the place feel more magical than it really was. A stray sparkler fizzled in the dirt, still burning out the last of someone's wish for happily ever after. Behind me, the barn door swung open. Footsteps. A voice I didn't want to hear, but knew was coming. Mark. Emma's voice. Shaky. Small. Like she hadn't been so bold in her secrets, so careful with her lies. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the field that stretched beyond the parking lot. Open and empty in a way that felt honest. Don't, I said, my breath fogging in the cold. Don't say my name like it still fits in your mouth. Her steps crunched closer. I heard the hem of her dress dragging through the gravel, the lace snagging on a thorn bush near the fence. For a second, I almost pictured us how we were supposed to be, her in white, me waiting at the end of an aisle, stupid enough to think promises were stronger than temptation. Mark, please, she said again, closer now. Can we just... I turned then, slowly. The lights caught her face, the smeared makeup, the half-pinned hair, the raw panic fighting with shame in her eyes. I almost pitied her. Almost. But pity didn't fix betrayal. And forgiveness was a language I didn't speak tonight. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just the wind brushing past, tugging at the hem of her dress, rustling the leaves overhead like they were gossiping about us. Maybe they were. The trees know things long before people ever do. She took another step closer, the gravel crunching under her heels, the sound so sharp in the quiet that it felt louder than her voice. Mark, I didn't mean, she started, but I cut her off with a laugh that surprised even me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. Just tired. Hollowed out. Don't, I said again, softer this time. Don't start with I didn't mean it. You meant enough to do it. More than once, I'm guessing. Her mouth trembled. A lie tried to form there. I could see it. The old habit, the easy reflex. But it never made it past her lips. Maybe because we both knew I'd seen the messages. I'd seen the photos. I'd seen every line of trust she'd drawn in the dark and handed to my best friend like it was hers to give away. She lifted her hand, like she might touch my face. I stepped back, just enough to make the point clear. You were going to marry me, I said. The words came out quiet but sharp. You stood there, in front of all of them, wearing white, telling me forever when you couldn't even keep your hands off him for one night. Tears slid down her cheeks now, streaking her makeup into something ghostly under the fairy lights. She opened her mouth again, but what could she possibly say? Sorry. Sorry fixes a spilled drink, not a secret that ruins an entire life before the first dance. Behind her, I could see the barn door still hanging open, shadows moving inside, David's shape caught in the doorway. Too much of a coward to come out, too ashamed to face me now that the truth wasn't just ours. I love you, she whispered. Her voice cracked right down the middle. I still do. I shook my head. Simple. Final. No, I said. You don't. You love the idea of me, the guarantee, the fallback. But if you loved me, even half, you wouldn't have killed this before it ever got to the cake. Her shoulders sagged, the veil slipping off her hair, landing limp on the gravel like a piece of the lie too tired to hold on. Somewhere, the last firework fizzled out. The sky swallowed the smoke and gave us nothing back but silence. Behind Emma, the barn door creaked again, that slow, rusty hinge sound that always makes you feel like something bad is about to step through. This time it did. David, still in his suit, tie loosened, that same fake calm he'd always worn when he lied for me. Lied to me. Lied with her. His eyes flicked from Emma to me, like he was gauging which one of us might hit him first. I almost wanted him to speak first, to spill some sloppy half-apology that would make this easier to hate. But he didn't. He just stood there, hands in his pockets like we were back at college, like we were just two drunk idiots trying to figure out who'd drive home. Emma stepped aside, just a little, but enough to break the invisible line she'd been clinging to. Now it was just me and him, the air tight between us. I looked at him the way you look at a photo you know you should burn. Memories flicker behind my eyes. Us on my porch at 22, him giving me advice on how to propose, him laughing over beers while telling me she's the one, man. The weight of how easily you can mistake a dagger for a hand on your shoulder. He tried to say my name. I cut him off with a breath so sharp it made him flinch. Don't, I said, same word I'd use for her. Simple. Heavy. Enough. He looked at Emma then, like she might back him up. Like she might jump in and salvage whatever twisted version of the story they'd told themselves to sleep at night. But her eyes were on the gravel. She had no story left to spin. I stepped closer, just enough, so he could see every raw piece of me that he'd helped crack open. You could have been anything, I said. The wind caught my voice, carried it straight to him. Brother. Best man. Hell, you were my brother. And this is what you chose. David swallowed, but he didn't deny it. Maybe he knew better. Maybe there was nothing left to deny when the truth was still vibrating off the barn walls behind us. I didn't want, he started, but the lie died halfway out his mouth. I watched him choke on it. Watch him realize there was nothing he could fix with an I'm sorry that tasted like stale beer and betrayal. I didn't hit him. God knows I wanted to. But I knew better than to bleed my knuckles on a man who'd already stolen the best parts of my trust. Instead, I stepped back, one clean breath of space between us, and said, I hope you're worth it to each other. His shoulders slumped. Emma's quiet sob tangled with the wind behind him. The barn door creaked again, the sound of a party dying behind cheap plywood and tattered vows. I turned my back to them both. The parking lot stretched wide and dark in front of me. I'd come in here as a husband. I'd leave as something freer, if not better. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I walked past them. The would-have-been wife and a never-again friend. Neither moved to stop me this time. Maybe they finally understood there was nothing left to hold. I paused by my car. Our car, technically. A little white sedan we'd picked together 6 months ago. Fighting over the color like that somehow meant we were building a life, not just buying time. Now it looked like freedom on 4 wheels. Or at least the first mile of it. Behind me, I heard David mutter something. I didn't catch it all. Just my name, the frayed edge of I'm sorry that sounded too thin in the cold. I didn't turn around. I'd wasted enough years turning around for him. For both of them. I popped the door open. The interior still smelled faintly like her. Vanilla perfume, stale flowers from the rehearsal bouquet she tossed on the back seat 2 nights ago. I didn't hate that smell yet. I knew I would later. But not tonight. Tonight, it was just a ghost of someone I'd finally put to rest. I leaned against the roof, let the wind slap my hair back from my forehead. The barn behind me glowed soft and golden, the fairy lights still lying for us, pretending this was a wedding and not a burial. Emma's voice floated over, one last reach through the darkness. "Mark, please." I almost laughed. I wondered if she'd tell people later that she begged me to stay, that she fought for me when the lie cracked. Maybe that would help her sleep. Maybe she'd tell herself it was true. I looked back at her then, just once. Her face half lit by the barn glow, her makeup a ruin, her eyes pleading for something she'd already killed. David stood behind her, too close, too useless. They both looked small from here, tiny figures framed in a fairy tale they couldn't keep alive. "Good luck," I said, quiet enough that maybe only the wind heard it. "To both of you. You'll need it." I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door on the night, and the barn and the weight of the life I'd almost signed up to drag behind me forever. The key turned in the ignition, an ordinary click, but it felt like breaking chains. In the rear view, I saw them standing there, silhouettes tangled in a lie too heavy to lift. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel sad, just empty and free. Sometimes that's the same thing. The gravel spat under the tires as I pulled away. One turn past the fence line, the barn lights disappeared behind the dark curve of the road. I didn't look back. Not once. The road out of the wedding barn was a single strip of cracked asphalt winding through fields that smelled like wet grass and the promise of frost before dawn. I rolled the window down halfway, let the cold slap my face awake. I needed that sharpness, the sting that reminded me I was still here, still moving, still mine. The wedding ring sat heavy on my finger. I twisted it once, twice, then forced myself to let go. I could have flung it out the window right there, let it bury itself in a ditch where maybe some fox would find it and wonder what piece of human wreckage it belonged to. But I didn't. Not yet. The part of me that still clung to how things should have gone needed to wait for a few more miles. The headlights cut through the darkness, catching glimpses of old fences and hay bales wrapped in ghostly white plastic. Every mile I put between me and that barn felt like peeling off old skin. But underneath, I was raw, exposed. I didn't know who I'd be when the sting wore off, if it ever did. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. Once, twice, 10 times. Emma's name, David's number, a text from my mother that just said, "Please come back. Please don't do this." But it was done. You don't stitch a heart back together when it's been gutted in front of everyone you know. You don't rewind a toast like that. At a crossroads just past an old, boarded-up church, I pulled over. The car idled, humming its tired song. I stared out the windshield at nothing. No cars, no lights, just a black field stretching into a sky that didn't care if I disappeared tonight. I thought about what people would say tomorrow, how they'd chew on the story in the same breath as the wedding cake they boxed up and carried home, how they'd pick sides they didn't have to live inside. Some would blame me, too cruel, too dramatic. Some would blame her, too weak, too reckless. Some would shrug and say life happens while they lock their own phones tighter that night. The screen buzzed again. "Emma, come back. We can fix this." I laughed, one dry bark that fogged the windshield. Then I typed the only reply I'd give her tonight. "No, you broke it on purpose. Now live with it." I hit send, powered the phone down, tossed it into the glove box like maybe the dark could hold it quiet for once. Then I put the car in drive, one hand on the wheel, one eye on the empty road ahead. I didn't know where I was going, just away. Sometimes that's enough. A few miles later, the road spat me out at an old gas station, the kind that's half convenience store, half graveyard for dreams people leave behind on long drives home. One buzzing neon sign flickered open in tired red letters. I killed the engine and just sat there for a minute. My reflection stared back at me in the dark window, tie crooked, hair a mess, eyes that looked too old for 32. I didn't look like a groom, didn't look like anything worth pity. Just a man with a ring that burned more than it weighed. Inside, the station was lit too bright. Rows of dusty chips, stale donuts under yellow bulbs. I grabbed a coffee I didn't want, a bottle of water I'd forget to drink. The clerk didn't look up when I dropped them on the counter. Some kid, maybe 20, probably thinking I looked like every other man who stopped here at midnight trying to outrun something. As he rang me up, my phone buzzed again. I turned it back on. Stupid hope maybe it would stop. It hadn't. Another text. "I'm so sorry. Please don't do this." No name, but I didn't need one. I could hear her voice in the words. Still sweet, still poisoned. I dropped the phone on the counter next to my coffee. The kid glanced at the screen, then at me. He didn't ask. Smart kid. You can't fix this kind of mess with small talk. Want a bag? He asked instead, bored, his eyes sliding to the ring still tight on my finger. I almost said no, but then I slipped it off, felt the groove it left behind, the pale strip of skin where a promise used to live. I set it next to the coffee, next to the phone. Keep it, I said, voice low enough to sound sane, but just raw enough to feel true. Good luck if you find someone who wants it. He looked at me like I'd handed him a bomb. Maybe I had. Maybe I was done carrying it. I took my coffee, left the phone and the ring, and stepped back out into the night. The door hissed shut behind me, that cheap chime jangling above my head like a tiny funeral bell. I sipped the coffee. It tasted burnt, bitter, perfect. I didn't look back through the glass. I knew what I'd left behind. Let the road bury it for me. Back in the car, the coffee went cold fast. I didn't care. I held it anyway, needing something warm in my hand to remind me I was still real, still here, still breathing, still the man who'd chosen to rip the bandage off instead of letting the infection fester. The gas station's neon glow shrank in the rear view until it was nothing but a smudge in the dark. I wondered if the kid behind the counter would tell the next customer about the man who dropped his wedding ring like a piece of trash and walked away. Maybe he'd keep it. Maybe he'd pawn it. Maybe he'd toss it in the gutter where it belonged. The radio stayed off. I didn't want songs about love or loss or roads that wind you back home. I didn't want words that might trick me into forgiving what I'd seen. Some betrayals deserve silence, a hollow space wide enough for you to hear your own heartbeat and decide if you can stand it. Outside, the highway signs glowed white in my headlights, names of towns that felt like places to hide. I didn't know where I was going yet. Maybe a cheap motel by the interstate. Maybe my brother's couch 3 states away. Maybe nowhere. Just away. I thought about David, about Emma, about how easy they made it look. Like love was a stage, and they'd memorized all their lines but performed a real show behind the curtains, away from the lights I thought I trusted too much. I could almost see her face under the fairy lights again, the way her eyes begged me to keep quiet, to swallow my anger and protect the secret she'd guarded better than she'd ever guarded me. My hand clenched on the wheel. The ring mark still ghosted my skin, pale, mocking. I wondered how long it would take to fade, if it ever would. If I'd wake up years from now and still feel it. The phantom weight of a promise that turned to ash the second she whispered I love you to someone else. A truck's headlights flared in my rear view, then blurred past in a rush of wind and diesel fumes. I watched it disappear. I envied it. How easy it was for some things to keep moving forward, never looking back. But people aren't trucks. People drag ghosts behind them. I felt mine in the empty seat next to me. In the vows I'd spoken into a mic that turned my voice into a confession and a sentence all at once. I gripped the wheel tighter, 1 mile at a time, 1 breath at a time. I'd outrun them both, Emma and David, or at least the parts of me that still wanted to understand why. Somewhere around mile 50, the world turned from fields to forest, long black shapes of trees swallowing the road on either side. The headlights tunneled through it all, carving out just enough light to pretend I knew where I was going. I cracked the window again. The cold made my eyes sting, kept me from sinking too deep into the soft part of my mind that still asked what if you'd stayed. That question was poison, a loop I'd lived in too long already. I took a sip of the stale gas station coffee. It tasted like burnt hope. Maybe that was fitting. Images flickered in the back of my skull. Emma's hand on my arm at the altar, her whispered forever that slid out of her mouth so easily. David's grin, his hand clapping my shoulder the night I told him I'd propose. The lie hidden behind his teeth, even then. Funny how you can stand next to someone for years, convinced you'd know if they were about to bury a knife in your back. Turns out, the people closest to you know exactly where to sink the blade so you won't feel it. Not until it's too late to pull it out without tearing something vital. I turned the radio on just to kill the silence, but all I caught was static and a preacher's voice bleeding through. Something about forgiveness, about grace, about how some wounds heal if you let them. I barked out a laugh sharp enough to bounce off the windshield. I didn't want grace tonight. I didn't want mercy. I just wanted distance. The gas light blinked on, a soft warning that even running away has its limits. I glanced at the dash. 50 miles left, maybe. Enough to reach the next nowhere town where I could buy more stale coffee, fill the tank, maybe sleep for an hour in a back seat if the world would let me. I caught my reflection again in the dark glass. The The suit looked ridiculous now. Tie crooked, collar half undone, boutonniere crushed, and browning on my lapel like it knew the truth before I did. I reached up, yanked it off, tossed it onto the passenger seat where her ghost had been riding shotgun since I left. For a heartbeat, I imagined Emma waking up tomorrow, alone in the bridal suite she'd planned down to the roses on the pillow. No husband, no ring, no cover story good enough to keep her family's stares from carving her up worse than I ever could. I didn't feel sorry. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I pressed my foot down. The road unspooled in front of me like a promise I could still believe in. Empty, honest, and all mine. I coasted into a 24-hour diner somewhere just shy of nowhere. Neon letters buzzing overhead like tired fireflies. Open. I killed the engine, the sudden hush making my ears ring with the echo of my own thoughts. Inside, the place was all cracked vinyl booths and the smell of burnt bacon that never quite leaves no matter how late it gets. A waitress in a faded pink uniform glanced up from refilling the sugar jars. She gave me the kind of nod that says I've seen worse, and poured me a coffee before I even asked. I picked the booth by the window. From there I could watch my car under the flickering streetlight, a white shell waiting to swallow me back up when the night decided it was done chewing on me. The coffee was black and bitter, and exactly what I deserved. I drank it slow, tracing the rim of the chipped mug with my thumb like I was trying to remember how it felt to touch something that didn't lie to me. The diner had a bathroom with a cracked mirror. I found myself staring into it, hands braced on either side of a sink that dripped every few seconds like a clock counting down to something worse. My reflection looked exactly how I felt. A man in a suit that belonged to someone else, tie loose, shirt half untucked. A ring mark ghosted my finger, pale and stubborn, like it hadn't gotten the memo that it was over. I splashed water on my face. Cold, sharp, didn't do a thing for the ache under my ribs. In that mirror, I saw the groom I was supposed to be, standing in front of family and friends, telling them we'd make it, promising her a forever she'd already spent behind my back. And I saw the man I was now. No ring, no vows, no illusions left to cradle me when the cold came in. Funny thing about betrayal, it doesn't just kill the liar. It buries the version of you that trusted too. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles ached, then let go. Let the ghost in the mirror go too. I couldn't carry him with me if I wanted to get out of this alive. Back at my booth, the waitress topped off my coffee without asking. She looked at me with eyes that had probably seen every kind of heartbreak walk through her door at 2 a.m. "You all right, huh?" she asked, not like she expected an honest answer. I gave her half a smile. It felt clumsy on my face, but real enough to hold for a heartbeat. "Getting there," I said. Outside, the night waited. So did the road. And maybe somewhere past all this mess, something that felt like freedom. I sat in that cracked vinyl booth long after the coffee went cold again. Outside, the world stayed pinned under a blanket of dark, so heavy it felt like it could smother the leftover wedding ghosts in my chest if I let it. The waitress drifted by now and then, topping off my mug even when I didn't ask. I liked her for that. The mercy of no questions, no pity, just warm liquid in a chipped cup, like maybe you could pour enough coffee on a wound and drown it. I turned my phone over in my hand. I turned it back on. Dumb, maybe. But some part of me needed to see if they'd finally stopped trying. They hadn't. Emma's last message just said, "Tell me what to do." I wanted to laugh. Or maybe scream. Instead, I put the phone face down and let it buzz against the sticky table. It felt distant. Someone else's life vibrating in someone else's pocket. A couple at the other end of the diner was whispering. Two kids, maybe 20, heads bent together like they hadn't learned yet how love can rot if you don't guard it with everything you have. I wondered if they'd make it. If they'd do better than we did. I hope so. God, I really did. I caught my reflection again in the diner window. Not the man from the bathroom mirror, but something softer. Tired. Hollowed out in places I didn't know could hollow. But not broken. Not all the way. Not yet. I thought about my mother. How she'd be sitting at the kitchen table by now. Phone pressed to her chest, wondering where her son had gone, what she could have done to keep him from standing under a barn's fairy lights and tearing up a life in front of 100 people. I'd call her soon. Not tonight, but soon. Let her hear my voice, so she'd know the wreckage didn't swallow me whole. The waitress slipped me the check without a word. She didn't rush me, just gave me a look that said, "Take your time, but don't forget to leave." I folded a couple bills under my mug, slid out of the booth. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped back into the night air. Sharp, honest, bracing. My car waited under that flickering streetlight. I didn't know where I'd sleep. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd just keep driving until the sun came up and the world looked different in the daylight. But I did know one thing. I wouldn't answer her tonight. Or tomorrow. Maybe never. Some stories don't deserve a final page. Some ghosts don't get to come home. The road out of that diner looked just like the road that brought me there. Empty, endless, honest in a way people never seem to be. I rolled the window all the way down this time. Let the wind bite my face raw until my eyes watered enough to blame it on the cold and not the ache in my chest. The ring was gone. The phone sat dark in the glove box. No more messages. No more promises that tasted like rust on my tongue. Just the steady hum of the tires under me and the soft thud of my heart figuring out how to beat without her name tangled in every pulse. At some point the stars came out. I caught them in the corner of my eye when I looked up through the windshield. A mess of pinpricks scattered across black, careless and perfect. I wondered if she could see them too, wherever she was now. Did she sit in that fancy bridal suite, mascara smeared, whispering excuses to David about how she could fix this, twist it back into a lie pretty enough to live in? Did he believe her? Maybe. Maybe that was their problem now, not mine. I tightened my grip on the wheel, knuckles pale in the dashboard glow. Funny how a hand can still remember the weight of a promise, even when the promise is ash. I picture what the guests would be saying by now. The pity, the scandal. My uncle shaking his head, saying he should have kept it quiet. Emma's mother, crying into a pillow sheet embroidered with our initials. My mother, up all night, replaying every moment she'd thought my life was set, safe, certain, happy. I should have been angry. Maybe I was. But under the anger there was something colder. Something quieter, a relief that scared me more than the heartbreak did. Because the truth was, deep down, I felt it cracking for a while. The late nights, the forced smiles, the way her eyes darted past me, sometimes like she was looking for an exit. I'd ignored it. I told myself, every couple has cracks. I convinced myself that love was about patching the leaks and calling a castle. But castles rot from the inside if the foundation's a lie. I pressed the gas a little harder. The speed felt good, a promise that if I just kept moving, the ghost wouldn't catch me. I didn't know where I'd stop. I didn't care. There'd be another gas station, another diner, another dawn where the world didn't expect me to say I do to someone who never did. And when the sun finally showed its face, I'd be ready to look it in the eye. No ring, no lies, no vows that never meant enough. By the time the first hints of sunrise cracked open the horizon, the road had softened under my wheels. No more forest, no more fences, just empty stretches of farmland that caught the morning in thin streaks of gold and bruised blue. I pulled over by a field lined with frost-tipped grass, killed the engine, and just sat there. For the first time since I'd walked out of that barn, the silence felt like a choice instead of a sentence. I stepped out of the car. The cold wrapped around me, sharp but clean, honest. I stuffed my hands in my pockets and tipped my head back, letting the dawn light find my face. For a second, it almost felt like forgiveness. Not from her, not from David, not from the people who'd spend the rest of the week chewing over my wedding speech like it was gossip candy. Forgiveness for myself, for loving wrong, for staying too long, for not seeing the truth when it was whispering itself hoarse behind my back. A bird landed on the hood, cocked its head at me like it was asking what came next. I didn't have an answer. But for once, I didn't feel the need to. I reached into the car, pulled out my jacket, and slid my phone from the glove box. It powered on with that cold little buzz. A few more messages blinking on the screen, pieces of a past life that didn't fit in my hands anymore. I deleted them one by one. Her name, his number, the last scraps of story I'd rewritten myself out of. When the phone went quiet, I slipped it back in my pocket. Just a tool now, not a chain. I walked a few steps into the field. The frost crunched under my shoes, the sky above me spreading wide and soft, the sun climbing slow but steady behind my shoulder. No audience here, no fairy lights to dress up lies, just my breath in the cold air and the steady drum of my own heart, louder than any vow that ever failed me. I didn't know who I'd be tomorrow, or next week, or a year from now when the ring mark finally faded. But I knew this much. I'd keep walking, 1 mile at a time, one dawn at a time. I turned back to the car. The road stretched out in front of me, open and waiting. I sat on the hood of the car for a while, watching the sun muscle its way over the horizon. It felt like a spotlight, but not the kind that burns you up, the kind that warms your skin just enough to remind you the world keeps turning, no matter who betrays who behind barn doors and fairy lights. I could have driven back. I could have turned around, given her the speech she wanted, the version where we patch up the cracks and tell everyone love conquers all. But lies only heal the liar, never the fool they leave behind. So I sat there instead, breathing in frost, tasting freedom on my tongue like strong coffee gone sweet. I thought about the man I was at that altar, the man I was when I raised my glass to a room full of people and buried my wedding day with my own bare truth. And the man I was now, alone, tired, bruised inside where no one could see it, but freer than I'd ever been. Sometimes you break your own heart to save it. Sometimes you stand up in a room full of polite applause and set fire to your own fairy tale because no one else will burn it for you. A truck passed on the road behind me, a rumble that faded quick into the hush of morning fields. I wondered where he was headed. Home, maybe, or away from it. Some of us run to things. Some of us run from them. I slid off the hood, opened the car door, and sank into the seat. The steering wheel felt cold under my palms, but solid. Real. Like something I could hold onto that wouldn't slip through my fingers when I wasn't looking. I didn't know where I'd go next. Maybe I'd call my mom. Tell her son's still here, just not the groom she'd planned to kiss on the cheek at midnight. Maybe I'd drive until the tank hit empty and see what kind of town I'd find at the bottom of it. All I knew was I'd keep moving. I owed myself that much. A clean road, a quiet heart, a promise to never settle for love that only looks good in pictures. So here's my truth, for anyone still listening. Love honest, or don't love at all. And if they lie to you, burn the lie down. Walk out the door. Drive away if you have to. Save yourself before you save the story. Thank you for riding with me through this one. If you want more raw, messy, real stories like this, you know what to do. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around. I promise I'll keep telling the truth, even when it hurts.